But he pulled me aside and he said, "Son, I don't care what you do in the army, do not go in the infantry."
Can you describe to me what that day was like when you got your name called?
Pretty frightening. The 6 weeks you were out there, it was full on. You had to be switched on.
When you're out on patrol, what sort of thing is going through your mind?
You've got to be mindful of things like booby traps. You've just got to look for things that are not quite as they should be. You can't switch off.
Trevor, thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
All right, so just wanted to start things off. If you could start with your name and rank.
Yeah, my name is Trevor Murdoch and my rank was private. I was discharged as a private.
So just before we get into your time during Vietnam and your life post-service, I just wanted to ask, whereabouts did you grow up and what were those formative years like?
Yep, I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney at Yagoona. Went to Birrong Boys High. It was a very good time to grow up. All the families were fairly close in the whole street, and the kids all played together. It was just a good environment to grow up in. And Birrong High was a brand new school, so there were only, when I went there in 58, I think it was open the previous year. So I went into first year and the first year went to second year. So there wasn't a lot of kids there, but out of Birrong, there were 4 Birrong Boys High kids in my unit in Vietnam, just through pure coincidence, just strange, but yeah, it was good.
So what were your interests growing up in the western suburbs, in a city?
Anything but school.
So what sort of stuff would you do?
Mainly sport. I played rugby union, rugby league, and I was as I grew up, I became an A-grade tennis player too. So I played a lot of sport, and it was mainly sport, and also music. I love my music too. But they were the main things because there wasn't TV till I sort of left high school. So there wasn't a lot of TV and that sort of thing in those days. But it was a good environment to grow up in.
So you were called up for national service, correct?
Yes, I was.
Can you describe to me what that day was like when you got your name called and your number?
Pretty frightening. No, actually it was televised in those days, and I was sitting in the lounge room with Mum and Dad and my sister and myself, and we just watched the balls come out, and unfortunately my birthday dropped, and it's the only lotto I've ever won. It was, my personal feelings were, oh, well, I wonder what happens next, it was because we didn't know what it was about and what was going to happen to us and all that. But I can tell you the family was a bit upset. Mum particular, because my dad had spent 6 years in the Second World War and she was married to him then and put up with it. So, but having said that, it was an interesting experience, yeah.
What did your father say to you, knowing that you were going into a war zone with his experience during World War II? Did he have a chat to you? And
did he what? He said to me, he pulled me aside. My dad was a very private man, but he was a very hard man. I mean, by hard I mean physically, and things were black and white with him. He was a very loving father. But he pulled me aside and he said, "Son, I don't care what you do in the army, because you've got to go in," but he said, "Do not go in the infantry. He said, if you do, I'll kill you. Gee. Anyway, we went down to Phuoc and 33 in our platoon, recruit training platoon, and 2 people volunteered for the infantry. The rest of them volunteered for other corps and jobs. And out of the 33, 32 got infantry. So it didn't matter what you put down. Yeah. And the reason for that is that was in '68, and the '68 Tet had a lot of, we had a lot of, took a lot of casualties in that Tet, so they had to replace the troops on the ground.
With Tet, so the years you were deployed were 68, 69, is that?
The battalion was there from November '68 to December '69. I was a reinforcement, so I went over in late March, early April, and so I missed the '68 Tet, and the '69 Tet hadn't started, so I missed out on the Tets altogether. But '69 Tet was a bit of a fizzer apparently, compared with what happened in '68.
And when you get to Phuoc, was it much of a culture shock when you got there and you had people yelling at you, you had your orders, you were learning the basics?
No, not really, simply because I had been in the, I was in the Air Training Corps from the time I was about, I don't know, 13, 14 through to 18, and I had risen through the ranks there. So I was used to sort of what happens in military life in a general sense. But there were a few things that were a culture shock, yes.
Do you think you could maybe elaborate on some of those things?
Well, it gets back to, I think, the difference, what was the difference between national servicemen and regular soldiers. I mean, the regular soldiers volunteered and wanted to be there. National servicemen were called up, they didn't have any choice. Didn't have any choice in where they served, in what corps and things, and were generally, or in the main, a lot of them were career people. So they were used to being in jobs where you had to think for yourself and everything. When you go into the army, forget about that. You're not allowed to think for yourself. You must react to an order. You can't question an order. If you want to question it, you can question it after you've done what they've asked you to do, whether you agree with it or not. So it was a different sort of environment for national servicemen, and you really had to adapt to the army, or else you were going to have a horrible 2 years.
No doubt about that, yeah. So we'll fast forward a little bit. So your role was in the infantry.
Correct.
You get your orders to go to Vietnam.
Correct.
What was your expectations of Vietnam? Had you heard of Vietnam before? Is this in the news you might have, or?
Yeah, look, I'd heard of Vietnam, and I knew it was mainly tropical jungles and that sort of thing. So, you know, that's basically what I expected. The expectations differed from reality, where you see World War II movies and pitched battles. There wasn't really any of that. They were smaller contacts and fights, except for Long Tan and Coral, Balmoral and those sort of battles. And we were involved in a reasonable sized battle too, but they were mainly smaller contacts with smaller groups of enemy at the time.
So what was your unit's mission and area of operations?
Yeah, we were based in out of Nui Dat, which is in Phuoc Tuy Province, and our area of operations was in Phuoc Tuy. We went out of it a couple of times, but only to, you know, if there was a reason for it, we were chasing something or what have you. And virtually our purpose was search and destroy. That was it. We weren't involved in any of the building of the villages or anything like that. They were the engineers. did all that, we had to clear the enemy out of areas and do what we had to do. Yeah.
What was your thoughts before going into a mission? Is there a briefing process and then there's some downtime to get your gear ready and then you go out?
Well, our operational methods, if you like, over there were in the infantry. We were out in the bush for 6 weeks on patrol. We'd be back for 2, out for 6, back for 2, out, and that was it for 12 months, unless you got R&R or something like that. So the 6 weeks you're out there, it was full on tactics, and you know, you had to be switched on. Back in base was for 2 weeks was generally to relax a bit and to get all our weapons ready to go back out again. And most of us were pretty meticulous with our weapons. We'd strip our rifles or whatever we had, machine guns, right down, oil them and put them all back together, clean them and put them all back together, cleaned all our ammunition. Each bullet was cleaned. We'd take it out of their magazines, clean them, put them back again, so we knew there was not going to be a stoppage. You couldn't afford to be slack with that sort of thing. So, you know, that'd take a large part of probably the first week, making sure you're right. And then you'd get your rations, so you had to break them out of the ration packs and then pack them into your pack however you wanted. There was stuff in there you wouldn't eat or feed to your dog. So that got thrown away. And the good stuff you'd put in, and you'd probably trade with some of your mates. You know, they'd like something which you didn't like, so you'd give them that, and they'd give you something you like, sort of thing. So, you know, there was all that sort of stuff.
So when you were out on these search and destroy missions, and you were out on, your platoon was out on patrols, and you were gone for 6 weeks in the bush, did you guys ever have any partner forces that you guys were working with, like any ARVN or US forces?
Depending on the mission, we were supported by American artillery a couple of times. We never operated with the ARVN, and we did give protection on one of our operations to American land clearing team, which was an interesting couple of weeks. But other than that, we operated by ourselves and in conjunction with other companies of our battalion or other battalions that were over there. Yeah, we didn't do any full operations with ARVN at all.
So what sort of small unit tactics would you guys use in an ambush scenario or in a contact?
It depends on whether we're being ambushed or we're doing the ambush.
How about if you're walking through and you guys are getting ambushed, you've got fire coming everywhere, what's sort of happening?
Well, the first thing you did, contrary to training, was hit the ground and find cover. Then the sort of adrenaline has clicked in by then, so you look for your guys either side and you try to work out where the fire's coming from. The information gets relayed to either your section commander or platoon commander, and then they decide what we do there. We either go into it, go around it, you know, what depending on the situation. There was never one thing for everything.
Just relating to that, Trevor, can you recount your first time in a firefight?
Yeah, I can. It's one of the things that never leave you, because I lost 2 very good friends in that one. We got ambushed in a bunker system. We approached this bunker system and it looked like it was an old, you know, deserted bunker system there, everywhere over there. But what we didn't know, there was 100 bunkers in this system, and they're all new bunkers behind the old ones. And we were ordered to press through, and we went through, and yeah, unfortunately we got ambushed, and we lost 2 killed in that one. That was the worst one, yeah.
We sort of talked about your tactics. in contacts. What sort of tactics would the VC or NVA use?
Yeah, very much undercover type tactics. You're very real. Well, sometimes you would catch them out in the open, but mainly they were very good at what they did. These bunker systems, I mean, I'd never heard about them till I got over there, and they're frightening things. They are frightening, particularly if you get caught in them like we did. And they would, you wouldn't see them a lot of the times if they were going to have a go at you, but they were also very good at using the population, the people. You know, they would coerce people. They were brutal with their own people, and so it's like, you know, you're walking down the street and I can't tell whether you're a Queenslander or a New South Welshman, and you can't tell whether they're South Vietnamese or North Vietnamese. Exactly the same thing, except the ones that wore black pyjamas. They were fair game.
And carrying AKs, hey?
Yeah.
Knew who they were. So could you run me through your typical day in Vietnam when you're out on patrol? What sort of thing is going through your mind? Obviously, the VC used to use things like booby traps and stuff like that. Right. How does one comprehend that and deal with that to still do an effective job?
Well, I guess when you're out in the bush, you're alert 24/7. You can't switch off out there, because you've got a guy in front of you, you've got a guy behind you or alongside you, whatever you're doing, and they're relying on you and you're relying on them. So you cannot switch off at any stage. You're on alert. You've got to be mindful of things like booby traps. You've just got to look for things that are not quite as they should be. You know, you might find like a grenade strapped to a tree, but it's down the bottom where it would be, or, you know, maybe half a metre up, but they've stuck a fronds or something over it. Well, that's not natural.
Something that's out of place.
Yeah, something out of place. The worst things were mines. You didn't know you were in a mine, you know, you were in mines until somebody activated one, and you really knew it then. So, and they were awful things. But yeah, I mean, it was 6 weeks out, full on. You got to sleep at night if you weren't on gun duty or sentry duty on the gun, which everybody had to take a turn at. So you'd never get a full night's sleep. And usually you're on, depending on the number of guys you had in your section, you're on sentry duty for at least an hour every night. Now, if you got the first watch, you were lucky, because you could do that and then you knew you weren't going to get woken up unless something happened. You also had to lay your flares and your claymore mines and all that sort of stuff out in front of your position to make sure that was there. But we really never had showers. We had no showers for 6 weeks unless we went into a fire support base to resupply with ammunition or whatever it was. We might be able to grab a quick shower. No hot meals. You might be able to heat something up if you're in a safe area. But you know, when you got back into camp, the showers were a primary objective.
Absolutely.
If you didn't go, everyone else would make you.
That's it. The other thing I wanted to ask as well, when you guys were on patrols, would you guys set up ambushes for the VC and NVA?
Absolutely.
So would you say that the operation tempo was quite aggressive in that you guys were hoping to fire the first shots and go out there and find them?
Well, you never want to fire the second one, because the first one's you don't know where that's gone. But yeah, we never patrol tracks and things. we were in the bush, so we had to make our own way through the bush and the bamboo and whatever it was. But if we came across a track, and particularly if there were fresh prints, we'd probably, depending on the time of the day, we'd probably harbour up there that night and we'd set up an ambush on it. And because, you know, if it's fresh tracks, they're probably using it to take ammunition and food and stuff further up the line to the front.
And sort of just to try and get my head around sort of how that would look like, are you guys setting up like an L sort of shape and with a bit of a crossfire, or?
No, it was usually a straight line. You'd have your machine guns at either end. You'd have your rifleman and everything in the middle. You might have somebody out a little bit further as a early warning, and you'd have banks of claymore mines, maybe 10 to 12 claymores. And if you let a bank of claymores go, it'd clear enough of the jungle, you know, that this building would fit in. They were a huge bonus for us. So we had the claymores, and you never activated an ambush until they were in what they call the kill zone, which was the middle. And the machine guns at either end were to stop, you know, either cut off
So flanking and stuff,
yeah,
to try and close
people trying to get out or people coming in to support. That's where your guns would be.
And would you guys have any air support or anything like that on standby, or artillery, if you were to get into a contact?
Yep. We the operational procedures were you never went out of artillery range. So we were covered by artillery everywhere we went, except I think there was one occasion we had to go to a place where the artillery couldn't reach us. But what they would do is generally have some attack helicopters ready to come in if we got into trouble. But you always were in artillery range. There's quite a good movie called on Long Tan that's just come out.
Yeah, Danger Close.
Danger Close.
Yeah.
And you know, Danger Close is where they or where they call the artillery in on top of them, which, you know, you're virtually being overrun if that happens. It happened at Coral, the fire support base Coral, and I never was involved in that situation, thank God. But we always, if we thought there was a larger group than us, or there was some reason, we'd always call in artillery, and we were supported by the Kiwi batteries, and they were very, very good.
So can you describe the change of your mindset over the deployment from when you first got in to when the middle and then when you left? Like, what sort of, how are you learning things out in the bush? How are you learning how to deal with things?
That's a very good question, actually. You learn by experience. That's the only way, or you listen to what the older guys, some of the older guys would take you under their wing and tell you what to do. If you weren't sure on something, you should have go and ask. You know, what happens here? What am I? What's expected of me, etc., etc. As far as mindset, when you first get there, for the first 3 months, you're walking on eggshells. You know, you really don't relax at all, and then you start to relax, but you don't switch off. You can't switch off. You only relax if you go on R&R or something like that. But the rest of the time is, you know, you're always on alert. And as far as, you know, my feelings about the country and everything, changed a bit. I got to know some of the people, and you know, the ones I thought were on our side were good. The others, I'm not too sure of, but yeah, it was an interesting experience. Yeah.
So can you remember your last day in Vietnam?
Certainly can.
What does that feel like to go through that whole deployment, being out on these search and destroy missions, being shot at, losing people close to you? What does that feel like?
It was a little bit sad in some respects that you were leaving your home for 12 months or how long you'd been there. You had mates and friends in other battalions, in other corps, like engineers or, what have you, artillery, and mates that you'd catch up with while you were over there, and you're leaving them. But it was a great feeling to be going home, I can tell you. They put us on trucks from Nui Dat and trucked us down to Vung Tau, where they put us on landing barges, and then we went out to the Sydney and boarded that. Once we're on the Sydney, we knew we were perfectly safe. There's, nothing could happen there because the Vietnamese didn't have submarines.
Could you talk a little bit about R&R? Like, would you do a lot in country, or would they give you leave to go out into other parts of Asia?
Okay, you had two types of leaves. One was R&R, one was R&C. R&C was in country, and generally, or the only place they could take you to would be down to Vung Tau, which was a port thing, and that was weird because we knew VC were down there having recreation too. Nobody carried weapons, which for that country was highly unusual. So, generally it was a 2-day down at Vung Tau. We got 2 of those in the 12 months, I think. No, sorry, I'm wrong there. We might have got more, maybe 3. When my turn came up for R&R, I applied to go to, I think it was Singapore, but all the Americans had filled all the flights. So the only place I could go was back home to Australia. So I went back home, but the good thing about that is they gave you an extra week because of the distance. So I had 2 weeks leave in Sydney, which was great to catch up with.
What was that like to come back home and then know that you had to go back? Was it hard?
Well, I wouldn't say it was hard because you really didn't have any choice. That's the way it was. What we tried to do is, catch up with as many of my mates and family as I could before I was due to go back. Going back, no, it wasn't pleasant, but still, that's the way it was.
So just to take it forward again, so you've left Vietnam, you're on the boat home. What was the reception like for yourself and your unit when you got back into Australia?
Yeah, we left Vung Tau and we were relieved by 8 Battalion, and we caught the last 3 days of a typhoon in the South China Sea. So it was horrendous seas, 80, 100-foot waves. But I don't get seasick, so I had a ball. It was the best cruise I've ever been on. Coming home, they went the long way round to Perth, to Adelaide, to Melbourne, then to Sydney, and then Brisbane was the last stop before they went back over again. Going into Sydney Harbour was just a magnificent spectacle and an experience too, because we all had to line the decks in our dress uniforms, going through the heads and up. The Adelaide, where we had to stop, was where our battalion was formed at Woodside in Adelaide. So that was sort of our home city. So we had to do a battalion march through the city. And, there wasn't huge crowds, but there were quite a few people out, and that was fine. We didn't find any issues there. And then Sydney was just great because all family and friends were there, so it was good to get off the boat, and then we went on leave for 3 weeks or whatever it was.
And so there was, during that time, how was the anti-war movement treating you guys? Was there many people trying to start anything when you guys got off the boats?
Yeah, mainly the uni students were the worst, and to be honest, up till about probably 5 years ago, they were still causing trouble in the hotels in the city. But it seems to have died off a bit now. Some people were really anti-war, anti-everything. And yeah, I mean, I was abused by people, but, you know, just shrug it off. I mean, what do? Either start a fight or go and have a beer. I know what I'd rather do.
When you came back home, what sort of support networks did you use?
I didn't use any. I didn't have any. Oh, well, hang on, that's not entirely correct. When I came back, I was only back for 2 weeks, and I got malaria extremely bad, and I had to go into the military hospital at Ingleburn for 2 weeks, I think it was, and then from there I had to go to the Naval Hospital at South Head for I was due to go there for another 2 to 4 weeks. So that sort of took a chunk out of what happened when I got back. I didn't use any other support networks other than the guys I served with. You know, we kept in contact with one another. We met up and had a few drinks and things from time to time, but we still do. We still ring each other once a couple of weeks and all that sort of stuff. You know, they're your brothers from other mothers, so you never forget them.
Yeah, I mean, it must just be so valuable to be able to talk about your experience with someone who was there with you and understands exactly what went down.
That's extremely correct. People would often say to you, you know, what was it like? What do you do? I've done a lot of talks in schools and for scout groups and things about it. And the kids are wonderful. They ask some great questions. But you know what the first question is every time? How many people did you shoot?
Oh, no.
Which is sort of bypass.
Let's talk a little bit more now about your life after service.
Yep.
So how did you readjust to civilian life, and maybe talk about maybe how you even met your wife as well?
Is this going to be censored?
Yeah.
The first thing is I was working, I joined the Bank of New South Wales at 15. So I'd been working 4 or 5 years before I got called up. I'd have to say the bank was wonderful. They released me to go into the army. They made up my salary. So not like a lot of tradies that, you know, had to drop from their own income down to a military pay, which is not real good. But the bank was very good. So obviously what I did is I went back into the bank, and they were great. They took me into town and interviewed me and said, you know, how you going? You got any problems, etc., etc. What do you want to do? And all this sort of stuff. And they said, well, you can start whenever you want to. If you want to take another 3 weeks, you do it. I was ready to go then. I was getting a bit bored at home, so I said, no, I'll start tomorrow. And I started at a Fairfield branch, which was good for me because it wasn't far from where I lived, and my sister worked there, so that was good too. Yeah, and I stayed with the bank for 40 odd years. I got retrenched back in '96, but I was with them the whole time. Yeah, the Bank of New South Wales was very good.
So how'd you meet your wife?
Oh, that's an interesting one. As a group, all the guys that got called up and started at Kapuka in Wagga in our platoon decided to have a reunion. And there were guys from all over New South Wales and the country and all over the place. And we decided to meet at the Carlton Rex in Sydney on a certain date at a certain, and it was, I can't remember the date, but it was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And this was about 4 or 5 weeks after we got back home. And anyway, out of the 33, 31 guys turned up at the Carlton Rex, and we got there at 10 o'clock. We're still there at 10 o'clock at night. Anyway, to cut a long story short, my wife's, one of her girlfriends was engaged to one of the guys in our battalion, and Carl had or invited Beverly to come down and have a drink with us, and she did, and she brought my wife there, and I took one look at her and I said, "That'll do me." And we've just got through 50 years of marriage, so yeah, that's how I met her. Wow. I tell everyone she picked me up in a pub.
What in life brings you joy, Trevor?
Well, I guess I'd have to say family, particularly grandkids. It's the greatest experience and joy that I have. Being with my wife, I love her company and we do everything together. We've travelled the world several times, and we've had a really good life, so I've got no complaints there. The joy is in the family and the loyalty to the family, and I guess loyalty to country too is really important. Some of the things that are happening today is absolutely abhorrent to people of my generation, and you know, it's the way it is, I guess, but I didn't vote for them. But no, being with the grandkids is fabulous. That takes up a hell of a lot of our time now. Yeah.
And they're quite young, yeah?
No, we've got a 3-year-old. He's the youngest. He's a little terrorist. And we've got a beautiful granddaughter who's 11, and I've got a wonderful grandson who's 13. And he's going to be a top grade sportsman. He's a baseballer.
Oh, okay.
And he plays representative for his district, you know, for Manly.
Yep.
He plays at state level. He's played in tournaments. He's that good at 13. He's playing under 16s at the moment. And he's a catcher, pitcher. He bats about 450, 500. There's nothing he can't do. But he works at it too. He's a really good player. His aim is to get a baseball scholarship and go to America, to university there, which would be good for him. Okay. But yeah, the grandkids are great.
What advice would you like to pass on to young veterans who might watch this, and how to deal with some of the darker times? Okay,
I've had a bit to do with veterans' welfare, particularly some of the younger vets through the Veteran Centre at DY. But I think the best advice I could give any veteran, particularly younger veterans, is that they're not alone. They're not by themselves. They've got mates. They've got other people in the army that would understand. What happens is when they go into when the black dog comes, they just shut off. They don't talk to people. And look, I'm a sufferer from PTSD too, so I understand this. But you've got to communicate to your family, your close family, and seek help. You've got to get help. You'll never get out of it by yourself. So unless you've got help and the right help, and there are a lot of organisations. There's more organisations around now than you can poke a stick at, and they've all come up as a result of the problems of the younger veterans and the younger veteran suicide, and it's so sad that that's happened, but it's because, you know, a lot of these younger blokes go in at 16, 17, 18, and they do 2 or 3 tours of Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever it is, and then they come out, they get out of the army because there's nothing else. All they wanted to do was infantry. They come out and they don't get detuned. When you go into the infantry, they tweak your mindset up so that, you know, you act on instinct. It's a natural thing for how you're going to react to that situation or that situation. And you know, you're really on a nice edge. When you get out of the army, they don't detune you. I think they're doing some of that now, and I hope they are, because that was the biggest thing. But the younger vets, they've got to seek help and they're not alone. That's the best advice I can give them.
So Trevor, just the other piece of advice I'd like from you is, what would you like to pass on to a younger generation facing a world of uncertainties, and there's obviously a lot of potential for more conflicts in the future?
Yeah, is there what?
How would you tell a young person how to deal with that?
Well, that's a very hard question, because I guess everybody is different. I think you've got to work out where your priorities are in life. And my priorities, and I would suggest that younger people look at it as well, is to my family and to my country. They're the two things that you can't compromise on. You must either be 100% loyal, or there's no such thing as 50% loyalty, in my book anyway. So you've got to work out your priorities, and you must be loyal to your country, and you must be loyal to your family. They're the two things that I think will hold you in good stead. You know, there's things like communicating and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you've got to do that, but it gets back to your core values, I think, of, you know, where you are and what sort of world you want to leave for your grandkids and those that come after you. I've got two boys, two sons, and I would hate to see them in the army in a conflict. They're both in their 40s now, so hopefully they might be a bit too old. But my grandson's not, and the younger one's not either. So you know, what sort of environment and world and country do you want to leave for them? That would be the advice I would give. Yeah.
Trevor, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Appreciate you coming in. We'll go do some photos. I'll give you a few minutes to have a drink of water, get yourself composed. But yeah, thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, James.
Just relaxing those hands too, nice.
Thank you, James.